Hello and very warm welcome at Amish Shackle 5858. I am Amish Shackle. Following are the news which have been reported by American, European, Canadian, Asian, African, and Australian channels and AFP, AP, Reuters news agencies. Now, please watch the news headlines.
Tonight, several developing stories as we come on the air. New details on the deadly shooting in Atlanta, what we've learned about the suspect and the officer who lost his life, the race to fight multiple wildfires with more hot, dry weather on the way, and Vice President J.D. Vance meeting with key allies before the high-stakes summit between Putin and President Trump. First, the deadly attack in Atlanta. The 30-year-old suspect now identified. Police say he fired multiple shots into CDC headquarters. The complex locked down, along with nearby Emory University, as officers rushed to the scene. Rookie officer David Rose shot and killed the Marine veteran, leaving behind a wife and two children, with a third on the way. Tonight, the search for a motive. The growing threat from wildfires, with dozens burning in the west. Fire crews now straining to put out the flames, with more hot, dry conditions ahead. Plus, severe storms in the plains turned deadly. Power knocked out for thousands. Our weather team tracking it all. Also tonight, Vice President Vance meets with key allies in the UK ahead of next week's summit with Russia's Vladimir Putin in Alaska. President Trump says Ukraine and Russia may have to swap some territories to end the war. Tonight, European leaders are demanding Ukraine have a seat at the table. Bystanders run for cover as shots are fired in the middle of New York's Times Square. Several injuries reported. What touched off the violence? The frightening injury during a preseason football game. How it brought the teams together in solidarity. A spectacular return from space. A crew of 4 splashes down to end a 5-month mission. History on the diamond. For the first time, a woman is umpiring a regular season Major League game. And America Strong tonight, the remarkable reunion, how these World War II veterans reconnected 81 years later. From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Today. Tonight, searching for a motive after gunfire erupts in Atlanta. Bullets flying near the Centers for Disease Control headquarters at Emory University. Shots cracking the windows of CDC. The gunman killing a police officer just months on the job.
We announced the loss of the life of one of our very own DeKalb County police officers.
I'm Dave Malkoff in Atlanta. New details on the dead gunman. Why was he targeting the CDC? The latest on the search for answers.
Also tonight, tremendous progress. That's how firefighters in Los Angeles County describe their fight against an explosive wildfire.
I'm Honors Gutierrez in Castaic, California, where fire crews are making real progress on fast-moving flames, but the danger out west isn't over.
Plus, a big chill.
I'm Willie James in Manhattan, White House, with a Trump-Putin summit in Alaska looming. Volodymyr Zelensky says his country will not give up any of its territory to its invaders.
Pacific splashdown. It's a first for NASA in 50 years. And later, she's a big deal in the big leagues. Jen Powell makes history taking the field in Atlanta as MLB's first female umpire.
Once I started umpiring, I was like, this is for me. And I can't explain, it's just in my DNA.
This is the CBS Weekend News from New York with Jerika Duncan.
Good evening. Jerika is off. I'm Reed Cowan. We begin tonight in Atlanta, where investigators say a clearer picture is emerging about the gunman.
The rate of muggings, killings, and everything else, we're not going to let it. And that includes bringing in the National Guard, maybe very quickly.
President Trump announcing he will hold a news conference on Monday to address D.C. crime. Metro Police data finds violent crime went down in the nation's capital between last year, but several recent high-profile incidents led the administration to bring in federal agents from multiple agencies Thursday night. They will have a visible presence across the nation's capital for at least a week. Let's bring in South Carolina Congressman Ralph Norman. Congressman, so the official statistics say crime is down in D.C. Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, it may be down, John, but look at the numbers in 23. Look at the homicides, the violent crimes. It's just down because, it never should have been that high anyway when you compare 24. D.C. is an unsafe place. We've had several aides get killed. Mass transit is a problem, and, you hear the sirens going up off seems like every hour. So I'm glad the press is stepping in, and something needs to be done at the nation's capital.
Yeah, well, what really got the president's attention apparently was the beating that was handed out to his former member of his Doge committee, Edward Korestein. Kid's 21 years old, got taken on by a gang of 10 would-be carjackers. Korestein shoved his girlfriend in the car that they wanted to steal, and then took a serious beating as a result. That kind of thing really gets the president's dander up, and he is paying attention now.
Well, the problem too, John, has been the consequences. D.C. has got the most lax laws, and if I've heard it once, I've heard it 100 times. If you try to defend yourself, you become the criminal. So it's got to stop, and I think that getting involved and letting the police have a presence, and the president's right. If it takes the military forces, he needs to do it, because that's where lawmakers are, and that's where a lot of business, a lot of tourists, particularly this time of year. It's just not right. It ought to be the safest place in the country with all the tourists we have.
Yeah, he says that he would federalize law enforcement in D.C. and take it over. So it sounds like you might be in favor of that?
A night battling flames in Atlanta, Canada. Wildfires burning out of control in Newfoundland and Labrador.
There's almost 3,000 individuals who are under an evacuation order.
And the new restrictions in New Brunswick to keep people safe. A breakthrough or a smokescreen? Why Ukraine's president doesn't buy into the hype around Trump's meeting with Putin in Alaska next week. A grim anniversary. Warnings about nuclear war. 80 years after the U.S. dropped a devastating atomic bomb on Nagasaki, Japan. And a well-armed videographer.
It's moments like this why we dive.
The inside scoop on this incredible footage shot by a giant Pacific octopus. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. We begin in Atlanta, Canada, where wildfires are raging. Newfoundland and Labrador has declared a state of emergency in a region where a fast-moving fire is being fueled by extreme heat and bone-dry conditions. The island's largest blaze is spreading, threatening communities along the Avalon Peninsula.
Tonight on PBS News Weekend, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he won't give up any territory to Russia after President Trump suggests a land swap to end the war. Then history is made as a woman umpires a regular season game for the first time in Major League Baseball's nearly 150-year history. And scientists in South Africa are making endangered rhinos' horns radioactive to save them from poaching.
You can't take that horn anywhere. It is radioactive. You can't take it through any airport, any harbor, any customs office. I'm telling you, this could be the holy grail to save the species.
This is NBC Nightly News with Jose Diaz Millard.
Good evening, I'm Gotti Schwartz in for Jose tonight, and we start with new questions from that deadly shooting in Atlanta. This was the scene near the CDC and Emory University, a massive law enforcement response to that rampage which caused damage like this. Look at those bullet holes in the CDC's windows, and here at the pharmacy across the street, one officer struck in that attack. DeKalb County Police Officer David Rose, just 33 years old, leaving behind a wife and 2 kids with another on the way. Police also identifying the suspect, 30-year-old Patrick Joseph White. Now the investigation is focusing on the motive. A neighbor telling our team today that White repeatedly expressed anti-vaccine views. Priya Sridhar has the latest from Atlanta.
Tonight, officials in Georgia releasing new information about that deadly shooting near the CDC at Emory University in Atlanta. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation identifying 30-year-old Patrick Joseph White as the suspected shooter.
We're on an active shooter response.
White lived at this home about 30 miles away from where the shooting took place. A neighbor who says she knew him well but didn't want to be identified, telling NBC News White had expressed anti-vaccine sentiments to her on multiple occasions and that he told her he believed the COVID vaccine made him sick. Other neighbors say they're completely shocked.
I didn't think that it would be someone down the street.
It's very unnerving. The shooting broke out around 5 p.m. Friday, sending both the CDC and Emory University into lockdown for several hours. Officials say police heard gunfire inside a CVS pharmacy and that several rounds went into the CDC nearby. Authorities later finding White on the second floor of the CVS building with a gunshot wound. It's unclear if it was self-inflicted or from police.
Criminals could be sent packing.
That's what the Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood has said. She said if they could get rid of them after they've been sentenced, it could save the taxpayer £54,000 per year per prison place.
Well, the changes cover fixed-term prisoners, with authorities able to block deportation on national security grounds.
GB News asked the Labour MP Alex Davis-Jones about the potential legal hurdles that the government may face in its bid to deport those criminals.
We're of course ready for any legal challenges, but we believe that this policy is robust. We are doing the right thing here by the British taxpayer, by the British citizens, and we are ensuring that we are committed to their plan for change and doing what they think is right.
Thousands of protesters took to the streets across 10 cities as asylum seekers continue to be housed in hotels. GB News was on the deck.
Our country bound to know who's coming, and we don't want people that are legally here.
And there were counter-protesters there too. They had this to say.
A bit unkind to target a whole group of people got nothing to win. It's one about your communities.
There was a Palestine Action protest yesterday in London. Police arrested 470 people.
Elsewhere, the White House is reportedly considering inviting Ukrainian President Zelensky to a meeting between Presidents Trump and Putin in Alaska next week.
An apparent loophole in Labour's disposable vape ban has been exposed as many consumers are still apparently flouting the rules.
To get in your full forecast coming up.
Just gone 6 o'clock, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ann Diamond, and this is GB News Breakfast.
Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak here on France. For Donald Trump's open
At 6 o'clock on today's show, the White House suggests it's now considering inviting Ukraine's president to next week's summit with Vladimir Putin.
And Liverpool and Crystal Palace get set to play for the first trophy of the new English football season this afternoon in the Community Shield at Wembley.
Plenty of news, plenty of sport to come on Sunday, the 10th of August. Confirmation President Trump is open to involving Ukraine's president in talks he's hosting with Russia on ending the war. European allies stress their commitment to Ukraine and say Kiev must be involved in peace negotiations. Also ahead, more than 450 people are arrested during protests in support of the banned group Palestine Action. Plus, the government vows to send foreign criminals packing, with deportations possible immediately after sentencing.
Teaming up with Rafa Nadal's old coach as she sets up a meeting with Aryna Sabalenka at the Cincinnati Open.
Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us on The Breakfast Show. The White House has said President Trump is open.
Government minister suggests Australia could recognise Palestinian statehood while Hamas is still in control of Gaza. Protests in Tel Aviv as Israelis call on their government to de-escalate war in Gaza. A police investigation underway after a former sanitation worker blew the whistle on that raves in an attempt, and runners pound pavement. The government minister has suggested Australia could recognise Palestinian statehood while Hamas is still in control of Gaza. The Albanese government followed Western allies in their commitment to recognise Palestine at the United Nations General Assembly in September.
With other like-minded Western powers, France, the UK and Canada, those three countries all out that they would be making this foreign policy shift at the United Nations.
On DW.
This is DW News, live from Berlin. Ukraine rejects the idea of giving up land to end the war with Russia. President Zelensky says Kyiv will not reward Moscow for its invasion. Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are due to hold ceasefire talks in Alaska next week. And crowds gather across Israel to oppose the Prime Minister's plans to step up the war in Gaza by taking control of its biggest city. And British police arrest more than 500 people at a rally for a banned pro-Palestinian group. Activists saying they're exercising free speech. The government says they're supporting a terrorist organization. I'm Aaron Tilton, Berlin. Thanks for joining us. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has rejected any idea of giving up land to end the war with.
Headline news this hour. The White House considering inviting Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky to the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska on Friday. European leaders have stressed that the path to peace in Ukraine cannot be decided without Kyiv's participation. Israel facing a wave of global criticism over its plans to expand the war and take over Gaza City. The UN warns the situation is becoming impossible, with a heat wave compounding hunger and thirst in the enclave. Iran rejects plans for a Trump-backed transit corridor near its borders. The proposal is a key part of a peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan and would give the U.S. development rights in the region. And Singapore marks 60 years of independence. More than 20,000 were at the Grand Parade at the Padang, while many more watched the SG-60 milestone celebrations at home. And that's the latest from the CNA Newsroom.
This is Asia Now.
It's 12 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 9:30 in New Delhi, and 11 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Rani Samtani. At this hour, the White House considering inviting Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky to the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska on Friday. European leaders have stressed that the path to peace in Ukraine cannot be decided without Kyiv's participation. Israel facing a wave of global criticism over its plans to expand the war and take over Gaza City. The UN warns the situation is becoming impossible, with a heat wave compounding hunger and thirst in the enclave. Iran rejects plans for a Trump-backed transit corridor near its borders. The proposal is a key part of a peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan and would give the U.S. development rights in the region. And Singapore marks 60 years of independence. More than 20,000 were at the Grand Parade at the Padang, while many more watched the SG60 milestone celebrations at home.
Africa News. The news.
African nations are still reeling from new sweeping tariffs that US President Donald Trump imposed on large parts of the world on Thursday. And many are still hopeful that renegotiation might be on the cards. This would ease the economic strain that countries like South Africa and Lesotho are fearing they could experience in consequence. The South African presidency said that it had spoken to Trump on Wednesday before the country was hit by 30% tariffs. And Pretoria still harbors hope for a renegotiation. This comes despite repeated tensions between the United States and South Africa since Trump took office for his second term. In Lesotho, meanwhile, an initial 50% tariff was reduced to 15% before coming into effect on Thursday. But here too, hopes are high to reduce this number in the face of an uncertain impact on the country's key textile industry. The higher tariffs are part of the American strategy to attempt to shrink US trade deficits, but the tariffs can have a negative impact on prices and consumers will have to pay. After fleeing war, refugees from Sudan often face another danger, a cholera epidemic, which has been spreading in the country for the past year. The deadly disease has broken out several times since the beginning of the civil war in April 2023, but the current epidemic's origin can be traced to July 2024.
Cholera has swept across Sudan, with all the states reporting outbreaks. Nearly 100,000 cases have been reported since July last year.
The waterborne disease has been spreading particularly quickly in refugee camps, where access to clean water and sanitation is limited.
We still have more than 230,000 refugees at the border in very difficult situation. So without urgent action, including enhancing access to medical treatment, to clean water, to sanitation, to hygiene, and
with sign of an end to the conflict and limited humanitarian aid, containing the spread of the disease is a challenge, and the plight of Sudanese refugees seems to be far from over.
President Umaro Sissoco Embalo on Thursday sacked his country's prime minister in a move seen as meant to position himself for a likely second term in elections due in November. According to a presidential decree, Rui Duarte de Barros, who served as prime minister since December 2023, was replaced by Ibrahima Kamara, a former coordinator of the Madem G15 opposition party. There has been much controversy over Embalo's term ahead of the November general elections. The small West African nation has endured multiple coups since gaining independence from Portugal more than 50 years ago. Guinea-Bissau's constitution sets the presidential term at 5 years, with maximum 2 terms. The opposition says Embalo's term should have ended on February 27th, but the nation's Supreme Court has ruled that it should run until September 4th. However, Embalo earlier this year set the election date for November 30th and said his first term will run until then, further heightening tensions. A mission sent by ECOWAS to help resolve the crisis quickly.